Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I want to do a collab with a good friend, Ultimate Goosebumps Man, on a movie that I think that we have bonded over in the past while talking about it, and we want to talk about the film "Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark." Um, Micah, aka the Ultimate Goosebumps Man, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Excited to finally get to this collab and talk about this movie because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. So,
Yeah, I remember you saying that when we were talking like favorite horror movies in Discord chat, and I remember sadly for me, I never got to see this movie in theaters because when I heard about it, I was like, I might check it out on streaming. And it was around COVID, right after COVID hit, I want to say. I think it was like June or July of 2020. And I was in the mood to start binging horror movies for a few months until Halloween. Because Halloween that year wasn't going to be the same as before. And I found Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I think it was on either Netflix or maybe Hulu or something like that, and I checked it out and I was blown away by how amazing this film was. And mind you, y'all, we are reviewing a PG-13 horror film, so I think it's appropriate for me to review something like this on Goosebumps Completionist. However, there are some things in this movie that I think kind of go a step beyond of your average kid's horror story, but in a good way. So if you've never checked out this film, please take mine and Micah's recommendation and go watch this. It's an amazing film. I don't think anybody would be disappointed. And Micah, I want you to kind of start this off before we get into like what the plot's about. What is your opinion, like off cuff, about Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, as in how it is as a film and what it kind of represents? You know what I mean?
yeah, I think it's just like overall for me, I think the biggest takeaway is that this is a love letter to the original book trilogy in pretty much every conceivable way possible. Just the passion these movie producers and the people behind the scenes and the special effects department put so much emphasis on referencing the books, on recreating those Stephen Gamble illustrations as faithfully as possible. That already tugs at my heartstrings for being a Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark fan of the books and how much of an impact those original illustrations had on me as a kid. So just getting to see those brought to life in such a creative and dynamic way really helps, and just the emphasis on practical effects especially in it really just sells you on these illustrations being pretty much almost like they just stepped off the page and into the real world. And I think the story that Del Toro crafted is and Overdahl crafted is very well done. I think that the kid characters are very likable for being a PG-13 horror movie. When spend it a lot on like teenagers, a lot of the time they can feel very flat and just kind of annoying. But I think pretty much every character in this movie works, and you sympathize with a lot of them, and you want them to succeed in what there's happening in this movie, and you kind of feel bad when they don't. So I think
Yeah.
that's the reason that this movie works.
To kind of jump on that, because I think you have great points. I think that this film took an idea similar to how Goosebumps 2015 took, which was a PG family kids horror movie, and upped the ante, made it PG-13, and did it 10 times better. We've often talked about this film in the lens like the Goosebumps movies should have been like this. And if they picked the right stories, it really would have driven that home. And this is one of those movies that has a blend of practical and CGI, like your big blockbuster Goosebumps movies. So, for all the you naysayers out there saying, "Oh, you can't pull some Goosebumps monsters off in this way with big budget movies," yes, you can. Scary Stories to Tell the Dark is the ultimate proof of that. And to be honest, I dare say that this might be the greatest PG-13 horror film ever made, bar none. I mean, there's nothing else that I can think of that even comes close to how great this one is for its rating.
Mm-hmm.
So take that for what you will. But yeah, I really love this thing. Micah really loves this thing. So Micah, I'm actually going to pass it over to you because you're such a passionate fan. I want you to share what the story is about and give the listeners out there or watchers a rough idea of what they can expect out of the movie.
So basically, the plot of this movie is set in, I believe, 1968, and it's centered in a small town called Mill Valley in Pennsylvania, and it's around the Cold War, or not Cold War, Vietnam War, and it's kind of this whole. There's a lot of political tension going on in this small town, with Nixon getting elected, and just the impending Vietnam War, and there's a lot of that kind of woven into the plot, specifically with one character who we'll get to it later. But the central plot of this movie is around a girl named Stella, whose mom left when she was really young, and she kind of blames herself for it almost. And she's a very great, sympathetic character that she's acted great by Zoe Colletti. And she's also very obsessed with telling scary stories. She wants to be an author, but she isn't really confident enough in herself to publish these stories that she writes. And she's also very close with two friends, pretty much her only friends, named Chuck and Augie. Augie is very much this kind of skeptic, kind of very, I don't want to say neurotic, but very just kind of uptight kind of character who's, again, very skeptical about a lot of things. He likes a lot of these like obscure classical kind of things, like French Pierrot clowns and things like that. And then there's Chuck, who is more of this kind of prankster, jokey, comic relief character in the movie, who is one of my favorite characters. I love Chuck in this movie. He gives some of the best laughs. He has a great performance by Austin Zazier. And basically on Halloween night, they end up going and pulling a prank on this bully named Tommy, who is this kind of jock douchebag who is pretty much just like torments these guys constantly. And so they ended up pulling off this successful prank, and Tommy ends up chasing them into this drive-in theater where they end up meeting this drifter named Ramon, who is basically at this drive-in hiding out. We don't really know much about him. He's very mysterious, and they end up forming a very fast friendship with the main trio. And Stella basically invites them to go to this haunted house that's in their neighborhood that has this big urban legend behind it surrounding a girl named Sarah Bellows, where apparently she wrote these scary stories and told them to these kids through her walls when she was alive. And those kids mysteriously ended up dying, and everyone blamed Sarah for it. And they kind of have this theory that she is a witch. And so they go to this house, and while inside of and exploring it, Stella finds Sarah's book of scary stories that was hidden in the basement bedroom where Sarah lived. And after taking it home, she begins noticing new stories writing themselves into the book, featuring the names of her friends and other people in the house as the main characters. And they slowly begin to realize that these stories may be coming true, and whoever is named in these stories goes missing. And so the whole movie is centered around this mystery of them figuring out what happened to Sarah Bellows, how they can stop this from happening to all their friends. And just throughout the movie, the stories that are written in Sarah's book are adaptations of specific scary stories to tell in the dark stories, including Harold, the Big Toe, the Dream, the Red Spot. And yeah, that's basically all I'm going to say about the story for now, just to not spoil anything. We're actually going to be doing a Goose Junkies episode on this later, so we'll be going more in depth into some of that spoilery stuff there, but that's all I'm going to get for now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a solid rundown of what you're going to expect out of the story. And off the bat, kind of start off the review. One thing that I really love about this movie is that while it's its own through line of a tale, using the periphery being the adaptations to kind of accentuate it, the through line story is equally as compelling as getting to the monster stuff in the film. And part of that, a lot of this actually, has to deal with the main character, Stella, in my opinion. I think that's her name. And what's the guy's name again? They meet at the drive-in, right?
Ramon.
And they hop in his car. What's his name?
Ramon.
I was thinking his name was Raul for some reason. Ramon. Okay. Stella and Ramon are fantastic main characters. I mean, I can gush all day long about how smart these characters are, how willing they are to put themselves in harm's way to help others. And throughout the story, it isn't just one note with these characters like, oh, they have to survive the night. No, it goes well past Halloween night into the next day, or actually, I think next few days, I want to say.
Hmm.
And all this phenomenon kind of brings them to the underlying mystery of figuring out the life of Sarah Bellows and perhaps this tragedy involving her, in terms of her not being what the community of the time said she really was. And of course, this is going down the whole idea of, I guess, trying to make sympathetic villains, which Hollywood has in recent years done a lot of. But this is one of the best examples of that, using these two main characters. And if it wasn't for them being the heart and soul of the film, I don't think the cohesiveness would have been as great as it was. But I think the biggest compliment I can give to this film is how applicable all the characters are, even the side characters, the jerky ones like Tommy the bully. What happens to these characters, some of them are deserved, and it's very rewarding in that regards, because you see these scary stories to tell in the dark monsters from the books coming to essentially take their lives or turn them into monsters or what else you can think of that's horrific. And that's putting aside how great the horror is in this movie. But yeah, and there are some characters that don't necessarily deserve it, but when it happens to them, it does help build the main characters of Stella and Ramon even further. So there's needed, I guess, loss in the film to make it hit by the end. And you won't know that until I say it, but yeah, the characters are fantastic. You need to watch this film just to see how well characterization in kids' horror can really be. I mean, this is one of the best examples I can possibly ever throw out there in the genre.
For sure. And the other thing I gotta like, if we're gonna move on for starting with characters to get a little more in depth on them, like as you mentioned, yeah, Ramon and Stella are great kids horror protagonists. I would say honestly, they're like top 10 kids horror protagonists in my opinion, like right alongside like Carly Beth in The Haunted Mask or any of those characters. They just do such a good job of being compelling, and like especially for being like performances by people who are probably late teens, early 20s at the time, like they're really solid performances from these kids, and they do such a good job at making you sympathize with them. They give them each their own story, especially Ramon. I'm not going to spoil what Ramon's plot twist is later on, but I think it really just helps further characterize him, and kind of for me makes him my personal favorite character, just because it adds a whole layer of depth to him that already was there in the earlier parts of the movie, but then just once you get all the answers to his full character and his motivations, it really just helps sell you on his character and makes him that much more sympathetic. And I just think that really works out. And by the end, when they're both kind of been separated, dealing with their own scary stories, monsters, while trying to figure out things in the climax, you want both of them to come out on top. You want both of them to not be taken by these monsters and by these stories, because you've sympathized with them so much by the end of it. And I think that just works so well. I think Stella also has a lot of really great depth. There's a lot of great moments with her dad in this movie, especially that phone call scene in the prison. Like, that's one of the best scenes in the movie. I think both Zoe Colletti and Dean Norris give great performances during that part. And it just really like highlights the emotion. And they really do feel like a father and daughter who care for each other and don't want to be separated, especially after what they went through with their mother. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just feel like there's a lot to them there that really just helps elevate them.
Yeah, I have to agree. And with that, you like when you look at the acting performances here, this is nothing to scoff at in the slightest. I think every actor in this film brought it. And it's one of those rare instances I can say that I've ever seen in a movie where I was literally plugged into each individual scene, no matter who was performing, what character was on screen, because of how engrossing they took their craft and they wanted to immerse the audience to be kind of in the story with them. And part of that, I think, on top of the acting and the characters being well written, is how atmospheric this movie is. You would not think that a movie set in 1968 would look all that period accurate in modern times, but you could have fooled me. Wherever they decided to film this movie, I don't know if they actually filmed it in the town of Pennsylvania, or if this is like a fictional town, I don't know. But it looks like the late 60s from everything that I've seen in media, at least. Just, I guess, with a modern cameras and what have you. But it looks exquisite. The darkness, the hues, the color correction, the music, the mood that it's able to establish, it just hooks you in. And that's so hard to accomplish in horror movies these days. A lot of the times, you'll get a setting that is, kind of cool, kind of serviceable, or maybe it's like a one setting kind of movie, like something like Abigail, or maybe you'll get a movie like Dark Harvest that's kind of similar to this in terms of atmosphere and what it's able to accomplish there. But then again, it also showcases Halloween in a time of year. Halloween is literally my favorite holiday. It has been since I was a kid. I've always had a soft spot for it. And no, that is not the main reason why this movie hits in the atmosphere. No, that's just another accent to it. I mean, looking at the Sarah Bellows house and what they're able to accomplish there, there's some flashback sequences. Well, I guess flashbacks, quote in quotations. This is getting to mild spoilers. Dealing with Stella later on in the movie when she is having this, altercation with Sarah herself. That was really well done and super immersive. I mean, like, I can just droll on and on about this, but yeah, it's one of those things that either a film has it or it doesn't. Luckily, this film does, and I don't expect anything less from Andre Overdahl, who is probably my top five favorite directors ever. And he has historically taken movies that are more small scale and made them feel larger scale. I think this is probably his largest scale movie he's ever made, personally, from what I've watched from him. But it's fantastic. Yeah, just add that to the other obvious win column for this movie. Atmosphere is exquisite.
Yeah, it's really they do such a good job making it so time period accurate. It really does just feel like it's the 1960s ripped straight out of history and put into this movie. Everything from again the set design, the props, the costumes, just incorporations things like a drive-in theater and just like old like cars like Tommy's Pontiac and just things like that just really just help immerse you in this 1960s world and just really helps. Again, it makes you connect to the characters and connect to the world more because it feels so real. There's nothing that seems cheap or fake in it.
Yeah.
The Bellows house is again a great set, all practical physical sets they use for that. And I remember seeing it behind the scenes. They actually filmed the set with the new and like pristine version of the Bellows house first and all those sequences, and then went back in and made it completely decrepit and then filmed all of the present day scenes in it, which I think is just such a great little way to do that. Just such great attention to detail to actually use the same set and just, make it decrepit instead of just building a completely separate set is really cool. And I guess this also talking about sets kind of can segue into what probably the main draw for most Scary Stories fans of this movie is the monsters and the adaptations of these stories. They are phenomenal. While they do take certain liberties and do change some stories and some plot beats and things in the story to fit the movie's narrative, none of it feels like it's disrespecting the source material in any way. And a lot of the time, I think both of us kind of agree, and most of the time improves upon the source material. And it just really just feels, again, like a love letter to these stories. The monsters are all so well done. It's all pretty much practical effects. Obviously, there are some CG things here and there to really kind of touch up the monsters and just kind of bring them to life a bit more. I think the biggest example would probably be Harold, giving him the giant hole in the stomach and the wooden plank arm, which honestly I think elevates his design and makes him far scarier, I think, than what Duhamel originally drew. As scary as that drawing is, and the way that in behind the scenes they actually did make it completely accurate to the Gamble drawing. But funnily enough, I think they even said that the reason they removed the belly is because they thought it made him look too friendly. So that's the reason they decided to go with the hole in the stomach design. But again, I think that works really well. It's really effective, really great CGI work as well with that. The Pale Lady looks incredible. Easily, I think that's probably the most accurate illustration to screen translation they did without a doubt, especially if you see behind the scenes of just the full practical Pale Lady suit. It's literally just straight out of that drawing. And the movie does end up doing some CGI touch-ups on the face to make her face a bit more animated and alive. But it works very well. And it blends in very well with the practical effects. You know, the big toe creature, which is ripped straight from the illustration from the haunted house, which I think is a really clever idea to kind of merge those two monsters and stories together. I think it makes that scene much more effective and honestly adds to the horror, just because I would say the haunted house illustration is probably the most horrific drawing Gamel ever made. So seeing that brought into real life and just knowing what the character dealing with that monster is going through, like it sells that fear with him. And just, they also created an original monster for the movie called the Jangly Man. That's kind of a fusion of a couple stories, including Meet Tidody Walker and What Do You Come For. That was a really cool design for the monster choice. I think it was a really genius idea of how they did it, how they kind of made him move. He's very, he contorts his body and like squeezes himself through prison bars. And it's just very unsettling the way they do Jangly Man and his like feral animal nature to him. And I just think, yeah, all the monsters were handled very well. And I'll get past to you first, but then we can get more into the horror itself. But
Yeah, like I have to say, I think my personal favorite monster in the film is the Jangly Man, ironically, because it reminds me of M. Night Shyamalan's Split when what is it? What's the actor who plays the main character in that movie?
James McAvoy.
James McAvoy, when he has that beast personality for the first time, and you see him like ripping open the bars, or there's something about it, about the Jangly Man, that makes me think about, I don't know, something that you would find in like a very creepy like point and click game, like point and click horror game, but you combined it with that character from Split. That's what I was getting from the film. It kind of almost looked like an I Am Legend thing as well.
Yeah.
But it looked way creepier than it probably deserved to be. And if I was a kid watching that, like, I'm being honest, y'all, some of you out there might be on the younger side. If you watch this movie in the dark and you get to the Jangly Man, the Pale Woman, especially those two, you will have nightmares. I would even say Sarah Bellows will give you nightmares in this film. Good Lord, she is scary looking too. I mean, Harold, I think probably tugs at my heartstrings the most because he's such an icon. Like, I remember seeing his art in the third book as a kid, and I always thought that he was the creepiest scarecrow that I've seen. And I grew up reading Goosebumps, and I knew about Scarecrow Walks at Midnight. There were some other Scarecrow stories I watched with my dad, like Dark Night of the Scarecrow, whatnot, but nothing was creepier than Harold. They're all fantastic here. And Micah, you did bring up there is some CGI enhancements. This is one of the token examples where you can have practical effects enhanced by CGI and it looks good. All of the monsters here benefited from it. None of it really was taken away at all because of CGI usage. And because this is PG-13, there's no abject blood, but there is some horrific, and I mean horrific scenes. I guess we'll go ahead and start off with that. The one scene that I think gets me every time, because I have a very squeamish thing about body horror. That's like one of the few things that can actually get to me in horror, because I usually just laugh at it. But there's a scene involving Harold and Tommy. And what happens to Tommy is nightmare fuel to me. I mean, that was just incredible. I know it had some CGI in there, but it was a blend of practical. You can clearly tell that they were putting some makeup on the actor. And luckily, it cut away before we got to see too much. Because, I think PG-13 kind of works best when you get to see enough, but then your mind fills in the blanks. Because if you go any further, you're going to be rated R. That was incredible. That was one of the best scenes in the whole movie. When we first meet the Pale Woman, I think she's under the bed of one of the characters, and he goes under the bed, right? And is that what happens?
That was for Big Toe. That was Big Toe.
That was Big Toe. Okay, so Big Toe, the Big Toe monster. I haven't really gone on with him. That was one of the scariest jump scares I've ever seen. And this film got me to jump scare like 2 or 3 times. And near the end, there was another jump scare with Sarah that sticks out of my mind. I was like, come on, man. But like I said, I watched this movie in the dark for this review with Micah here. Man, it's so good when you can't see what's going on around you. Seriously, turn the lights off and watch the movie. You'll see what I'm talking about. I mean, what the way it's able to deliver the big toe monster there was incredible. The Pale Woman, she is like up there with some things you'll see in The Conjuring. I mean, she is frightening. I saw somebody online kind of compare her to the Nun, like things that just give me nightmare fuel. I can totally understand that. I mean, she's frightening. Like I said, Jangly Man's my favorite monster. I love the scene. I think it was involving him later on in the movie. It was like either in the prison or right after the prison scene. That was incredible. I mean, the list goes on. Micah, why don't you add on to your favorite horror scenes? Because I feel like I'm just going to keep rambling here about it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I would say like I don't know. My favorite scene is Harold. I think I just like the body horror of what happens to Tommy is so creatively horrifying for being a PG-13 movie and not obviously being able to show any blood. That was one of the most genius ways to kill a character off. And it's just like it's something I've never seen in a movie before. And it's like again, the way they do it is very effective, very horrifying. There's some really intense and scary sound design with what's happening to him. And you see it all in close-ups. You never get like a full pan-out shot of what's going on to his full body. You just see close-up shots of like hay growing out of his hands and like sprouting from his ears, or like just him like again like gagging as this hay is like spewing out of his mouth, or like even like his eyes just going black at the end as this everything comes to a culmination. And just that whole scene is so like uncomfortable to watch, especially if you've ever been pricked by a piece of hay before and know how sharp and painful that is. Just imagining what kind of pain Tommy must be going through in that sequence makes it so much more horrifying and effective in this movie. The big toe, I think easily the big toe is the most suspenseful sequence of the movie. I remember seeing this movie in the theater with my friends, and I was on the edge of my seat during that big toe sequence. The way they build up the tension throughout the scene, starting just Augie taking the pot of stew, this mysterious pot of stew out of the fridge, and just slowly eating it as this Stella and Ramona are telling him what's going on. And you see the story title being the big toe, and you're aware of what the original short story is. You know what's coming as he's eating that stew, and you're just like waiting with bated breath as like this, what's coming. And when it does hit, it is one of the most like squeamish and nauseating things. I think like I remember my entire theater got like a really big reaction when they saw him actually eat the toe. And then just upon that, the instant you hear the "who took my toe" line, the tension of the scene skyrockets to where Augie runs up to his room, hides under his bed, and all you hear are these creaking footsteps slowly approaching his door. You see the doorknob slowly turn and the door creak open, and then it's just silence. You have no idea what's going on. You have no clue where the toe creature is. It's just silence, and you just get this probably the best scene of tension of Augie slowly creeping out, and stupidly, by the way, crawling out from under his bed and looking around. And it gives you so many good fake outs where you think the creature is going to be like to the side of his bed. Then he like crawls up and he slowly starts like peeking up over the top of his bed. And when I saw this in theaters, I was so expecting her to be on the bed to jump scare him. And then you get that just like easily, I think, the most effective jump scare of the scene, where he is suddenly just slammed against the floor and dragged back under his bed. And you get that really awesome close-up shot of the toe creature just screaming at him as he's dragged into the darkness. I think that was easily just the most effective scene of the movie in terms of just like building that tension and building that suspense of not knowing where the jump scare is going to be. And the other one I think is the most effective is Pale Lady. That scene is something straight out of a nightmare. Like, I think like in terms of the sheer like scariness of the scene. That would be the scariest situation of all of them, I feel like. Just this growing sense of hopelessness that you feel as Chuck is lost in these hospital hallways. This room is just bathed in this blinding red light. And no matter where he runs, the Pale Lady is always at the end of that hallway, same distance away in every hallway, always slowly getting closer. And just that feeling, again, the feeling of hopelessness as she just continues to converge on Chuck. And like, there's no getting around her. There's no escaping. And just having like that feeling, this knowing as Chuck is feeling, this feeling of impending doom as your inevitable death slowly is coming towards you from every angle and no escape is just so horrifying as a concept. And I think they just pulled off that scene so well.
Mm-hmm. You know, I kind of want to highlight one other thing that we haven't talked about, and that is the red spot. I think this is probably the most recognized scene because it was in all the promo materials that I've seen. I think it's one of the most viewed videos of the film on YouTube, of just the scene of the girl in the bathroom with the spider bite on her cheek. Everybody knows this story. I think it's a very famous Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark story as well. It was one of my favorites as a kid. When I got to the scene the first time, knowing what happens in the short story, I'm like, okay, well, how are they going to pull this off on the screen? That scene is still gross. How I'm like, I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, it's probably going to be CGI. Let's see how it looks. No, they still made it look gross, and it was equally as horrifying because the short story, it kind of ends. It just tells you like what happens, but the film actually goes out of its way to show you like a little more on top of it. Um, and that was still like it's not I wouldn't say the best scene of the film and using the monsters, but it's still really great in its own regard. And I think it takes place. Doesn't it take place in the hospital?
No, it's in the high school bathroom.
High school
It's
bathroom.
like right before Ruth's like big performance because she's in the school play.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, she's in the bathroom because I usually get the hospital and the high school scenes mixed up. But yeah, like she's in the bathroom and she's like freaking out and she sees this like pulsating thing on her cheek. It's the grossest thing that you could possibly imagine. Not as gross as what Harold does to Tommy, but it's probably the second grossest thing you're going to see in the film. That was exquisite. There's even some like nighttime, like going around the town stuff going on in the film, where it's kind of like a blockbuster in that sense, like something like it, that's probably the most Goosebumps 2015 like a portion of the
Mm-hmm.
movie. But even that stuff was really great too. Like they're going through the town and I think it's Ramon and Stella or this is kind of like right after I think they leave the prison or whatnot or the jail, and they get hung up in like the streets. That scene was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And that builds into the climax when they go back to where they need to go. But that's another one of those things that in my head while I'm watching this, I'm like, this is another thing that this film gets right, and is that you can tell that it's very finely paced, it's very finely tuned in what it's trying to do. Even though some people I have seen online complain about how slow moving the first 30 minutes can be. It's very expository. It's setting up the Halloween night. It's setting up the background of the characters and how, they're getting bullied by Tommy and they find Ramon and then that's how they end up in the house. It does take a little while to get to there. But aside from that complaint that I can kind of understand, that scene, like, from that point on, it's everything in the film is just finely tuned, finely paced, and it's very action heavy, and it just gets right to the point. I mean, like, you start getting into character after character after character from the stories that you love, and you get some new characters thrown in, which I guess brings us to the story itself. I think going back to what I said earlier, the through line here, the story, really is where I think this movie excels the most. If it's not the characters doing a fantastic job with like the acting and whatnot, and the atmosphere really hooking you in, it's the story. I mean, this is not, I want to say, the most inventive thing ever. I mean, you have a woman who's said to be a, like, kind of like a figurehead of a legend of a town. Uh, it's very similar to something akin to Hocus Pocus. But imagine if the Sanderson sisters were wrongly accused of something that they possibly still were, doing in the afterlife, and um, let's say there's more morally gray areas with the villains, and the film, let's say Hocus Pocus decided to explore that. That's essentially this movie. Don't get it twisted. Sarah Bellows is not somebody to be messed with. She's evil in the afterlife, okay? And she's evil because in her mortal life, she was treated very poorly by her family, as you learn in the backstory. She had a horrible upbringing. Society put a lot of blame on her for a lot of bad things that happened, which partially could have been true, partially not could have been true, in some aspects. But you know, the through line of the story is we're trying to figure out what her shtick is, and I think all the answers we get are super satisfying. This is one of the best payoffs I've seen in a mystery-driven horror film. Period. Um, because there's not predictability at all with Sarah. Because I don't know, the way the story is laid out, most of it is dealing with like Stella having her Sarah's book and discovering that, oh, when these stories are drawn to page, whoever's name is the character of the story is going to be affected in our friend group or people around us. They discovered that portion, but you don't know why that is. Like, oh, you didn't know that element. All we knew beforehand was that Sarah would just read these stories to kids and then they turn up dead. Well, that's not the case, maybe. Maybe it's the book writes the stories and then it said that she read them. There's a lot of ambiguity there, and you're wondering what the deal is. And when you get the answers, it's not one of those movies that has to essentially have a character just explain it to you. No, it actually shows you in many areas where it counts these answers, and it's easy to piece together the context of the film. And I really love this film for doing that and not insulting the intelligence of a PG-13 audience. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think the story as a whole is very revisitable. Rewatching this movie, I think it gets better every time I watch it. I would say that maybe the first time I watched it, I wasn't all that impressed with the story, but I was like, this is really good. But then the second and the third time I watched it, I was like, you know what? This is really good stuff, especially when you've experienced a lot in the genre like we have. The storytelling here is great. I mean, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of covered some of my points already earlier, but yeah, I just think the way that the writers, I don't remember who wrote the script exactly, but they did a really great job at just kind of making this engaging story, especially again giving us the hit mystery of Sarah Bellows and slowly revealing more as the movie goes on, with them finding things in like newspaper clippings, meeting the old house, like the daughter of the house servants that we used to work for the Bellows family, her giving them more information, and just again the slow piecing together, and then especially that red room scene in the hospital right before the pale lady sequence, where everything is finally revealed to what really happened to Sarah. And it's honestly kind of heartbreaking when you realize what happened to her and how horribly she was treated by her family. And it's that's easily the most uncomfortable sequence of the movie, I think, is just like when they're listening to that wax cylinder and just hearing the brother interrogate Sarah, and just the sadness and suffering in Sarah's voice as she's trying to tell the truth, but the brother is just refusing to let the truth come out.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the whole electroshock therapy that happens there is just really disturbing. And also that the whole sequence is a great way that leads into the pale lady sequence, with suddenly Sarah's ghost almost taking over this wax cylinder and begins reading the dream story out loud. I think really that whole sequence was really well done and just kind of giving us more backstory, but then suddenly taking complete 180 and becoming really creepy as we suddenly start learning what's going to happen to Chuck, who's out wandering the halls of the hospital somewhere. And I just think, yeah, that whole story with Sarah and the resolution that happens between her and Stella in the final act inside the house, I think was really well done. And just that whole story with Sarah Bellows was well handled. And I think you can tell that there was just as much love and care put into the overarching story as there was in the individual adaptations. And the adaptations in general don't take away from the story at all. They all feed into the narrative, they all feed into that through story, and it just flows very effectively, and everything works very well in terms of the story and pacing of the movie for me.
Yeah, like it's one of those. It's one of the few times in these type of movies where you have like a book franchise that's anthology based, and you try to make a through line story and connect, in I guess cameo ways, kind of. Not maybe in this case for scary stories, but in Goosebumps' case, right? It's kind of cameos or glorified ones where you have little scenes involving certain monsters that I guess production wanted to put in there. This is like the best idea of that's ever been put to screen. And honestly, to kind of end it off here and getting into like how we feel about it, like ratings and whatnot, this should be the template moving forward for other franchises like that. If hypothetically, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Haunting Hour, or any other kids horror series wanted to come back to this type of film and do it for those franchises, do what Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark did. Don't do what Goosebumps did. Don't do that. No, you need to have a compelling through line, and I think it, like at least in modern kids horror, I think I think there's room for family films still. But what I appreciate about this one is that I think it's still made for kids at heart, but it gives them enough scare factor to make it a worthwhile first horror movie for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this, like I said, I think this is the best PG-13 horror film ever made. This film right here, produced by Guillermo del Toro, directed by Andre Overdahl, is a masterpiece. It really is. If I had any flaws with the film, I'm not going to deduct anything on it because I'm forgiving on it. But I do think that the whole film's angle with Sarah at times can be kind of, like, okay, I get that we're supposed to be empathizing with her and we're supposed to feel bad for her, but she's still a villain. She's still awful. What she's done is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
How can you excuse that? I feel like if you can put that aside and you can get over that, I guess, minor logic hurdle of the movie that is trying to force down the audience's throats a little bit, involving her character, this is fantastic. Like, absolutely fantastic. I think that this is, as a massive fan of Andre Overdahl, as a director, this is his magnum opus. I mean, there's other films that he's done, like Autopsy of Jane Doe and Last Voyage of the Demeter. Fantastic films as well. But this is like chef's kiss kind of stuff. I would hope that if Goosebumps wanted to take another crack at kids' horror movies and they want to go back to the formula, for some reason, bring Andre Overdahl into it. I mean, I think he would knock it out of the park. Not saying that he would maybe want to. Maybe because, I don't know, he probably did it because Guillermo del Toro got him to do it. I don't know. But I would give this movie a 5 out of 5 stars. This is one of the few exceptions in movies where I genuinely think that this is a perfect movie when you break it down. And that's just my thoughts. What would you give Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
I'd 100% agree. It's easily the 5 out of 5. I just think it is masterfully made. And as someone who, again, grew up reading the books, it's so clear how much love and passion they put into this film and bringing the books to life, adding it through narrative. And another thing I really want to give credit to first before we stop this, is the score of the movie and the music in it. Because I'm a music nerd. I love movie scores. I love that kind of stuff. And so the way they did the score, and I think I remember reading or hearing an interview with Marco Beltrami and Anna Drubik, who did the music. And I think it's ironically enough, it's made by the same guys who did the Scream movies scores. So that was really cool. But the thing I appreciate is that throughout the score, they they used the Hearst song in some parts of the score from the original books, which I really appreciate. The opening notes of the beginning of the movie is that song. It's the little tune that's in Sarah Bellows' music box. And I
Uh-huh.
think that was just a really great way to bring another thing from the books in. And they also did something really cool where they gave each monster its own instrumental motif. Harold uses a lot of guitar and banjo. The big toe is brass. The red spot is like violins and string instruments. Pale Lady is woodwinds, and the Jangly Man is percussion. And I just think that's just really cool how it gives each monster its own unique flavor in terms of the music to really and the music works so well with the monster that they use. And I think this just helps tie the movie together in this perfect little bow. And also using Donovan's Season of the Witch at the beginning of the movie. I love that song. So I think that was just a really great addition to the beginning. That really helps set the tone of the movie.
That song felt like it went on for like 10 minutes, but it's the perfect song to set up the movie. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, you know what, as a massive Halloween Season of the Witch fan, part of me, if they ever wanted to remake Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, they just need to play the song for the first 10 minutes of the remake.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think like it would just rope you in, and like and like how it's like it's the season of the witch or something like that, and you get to see the various parts of the town. I mean, like this, how the movie sets you up even is probably one of the best openings I've ever seen in a movie, where you get like a aerial shot and you see the streets of the town, you see the decorations of Halloween, you see the cornfields, you see the mills, you see this old decrepit house. I mean, it goes through the whole town and explores it with you with various different characters that you're gonna meet in the film. It's brilliant. It's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely brilliant. And the fact that, like, going back to the compliment about it being set in the 1960s, it immediately establishes this is not a modern time film. So you're gonna be free of cell phones, and you're gonna be free of influencers and all that. I think that also helps this movie too,
Mm-hmm.
because it just reminds you of a simpler time. Um, and I think, didn't the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books come out in the 60s?
I think it was the 80s. I think they came
80s,
out.
but didn't he? I want to say there's something about the 60s that's important here.
I can't
Uh,
remember what it was, but
Maybe he started collecting the stories. Like, I think he had the idea to make the books, and then it came out in the 80s or something like that. But he was collecting stories for years before he actually put out the first one.
mm-hmm.
Um, so that should tell you, like, everybody behind this film did their homework. I think that they made a love letter movie here, and they should really hang their hat on it. In a lot of ways, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, this is a book series that has like paragraph stories. Like, when I say paragraph, I'm like maybe like a few sentences, and that's the story. The fact that they're able to take that and add as much as they did here, we're not really going into too much spoilers because we have a whole Goose Junkies podcast we're going to talk about, and like what the things add in terms of like context and stuff. But holy crap, I would say for majority of these, they were able to take a super, I mean a super small story and make it way better. This is
Mm-hmm.
a proof of concept that I think they can really do a Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark show. I mean, I would love to see episodic tales of just dedicating a story from a book, or maybe they have a new story, a new folk legend, new folk tale they want to bring to add to the mythos and the franchise. I welcome that, because as long as they have the spirit of this movie in line, and they have the budget, quality over quantity, they could knock this show out of the park. If we're not going to get a second movie, I would love a show.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of a concept I was throwing around too for a while of ideas. I think that could work so well. I'm not sure how they do some stories that are very simple, like for example, something like The Viper. That's a very short little story that's like self-contained to one sequence. But I'm sure they could figure out a way to expand it a bit more. But yeah, I think that'd be a great way to do it. Or even throw some things in from like in a dark, dark room if they really wanted to. Like give us the Green Ribbon as an episode or something like
Yeah,
that.
In the Dark Dark Room is essentially another Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for a younger audience,
Yep.
but still, fantastic movie. Yeah, this gets a glowing recommendation from me and Micah here, y'all. And thank you for watching this whole review with us and letting us ramble on for almost 50 minutes about this film. But yeah, thank you for doing this collab with me. If you're not subbed to Micah, aka the Ultimate Goosebumps Man, I'm gonna have the link to his channel in the comment section and in the description down below for you all to go check out his content. Please do so if you haven't before. Drop him a like, give him a subscribe, give him some support. Until next time, we'll see you very shortly when we talk about scary stories to tell in the dark on the Goose Junkies podcast. That's all I have for tonight. Is there anything else you want to add, Micah, before we get off?
Not really. Just thank you for having me on and doing this collab. It's always fun to talk to you about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Well, we hope you had a fun time, and we'll see y'all in the future. Take care.